There's an old joke that goes back to Groucho Marx that says, I would never want to be a member of a club that would have someone like me for a member. Something delightfully circular about thinking about, I don't want to hang out with a bunch of people who are like me, I'm a mess, right? And yet I think in a wonderful and surprising way, that's not that far off the mark from what it is to be a member of the church, to be a part of the people of God. This strange and motley crew of unexpected and maybe even undeserving mixed bag of people who are all gathered and bound up together because they belong to God, even if they look across the room at each other and go, how did we all end up here? This coming Sunday, the church has had this practice for centuries of remembering the lives of not just individual people who are moral exemplars, but that tells the story of all the saints, to remember that we are connected with people from every time and every place, that we really are this very strange sort of club that would have anybody's and nobody's for members, not because we've earned our way in, but because the reach of God's inclusive embrace goes everywhere in all directions. And this coming Sunday, we hear out of the scriptures these beautiful and also surprising, if we let them be surprising, words that we sometimes call the Beatitudes. Jesus has at the beginning of what we call the Sermon on the Mount this sort of declaration about God's upside down kind of values. And in a culture and in a time where people assumed, well, you know who's living the good life, the rich and the powerful and the well-connected, those people are the ones living the good life. Jesus comes along and goes, no, in God's ordering of things, you want to know who's blessed. You want to know who God is particularly looking out for. It's the brokenhearted, the poor in spirit, those who are grieving, the empty-handed, the fearful, the wallflowers who are too afraid or have been stepped on and afraid of speaking up or saying what they need, the people who are persecuted, the people who are hungry for justice to be done and are being starved of it. And then he goes on in this list of surprising recipients of divine blessing and says it's the people who make peace in the world who are blessed. It's the pure in heart. It's not the ones the world thinks of as celebrities or big names or the people you want to be in a club with. It's the anybody's and the nobodies. It's the surprising motley crew of people who God has gathered together in a new kind of community. That's what it is to belong to the people of God, to belong to the communion of saints. Sometimes, let's be honest, church folk, especially church folk in my tradition as a Lutheran Christian, we get a little bit antsy about talk about saints because it can sound like we're just putting up the who are the superheroes that we're all going to worry I can't live up to, or we're worried about making other people who are followers of Jesus into more important figures than Jesus himself. And I get those concerns, but at times like these we maybe need to be reminded that none of us does this alone, that we're a part of a much wider, more beautiful, and richly diverse community of people with faces and names and stories from all over, and almost all of them would have said, how did I end up in a club like this, with a surprising diversity of every background and language and culture and different ways of living out what it looks like to follow Jesus. This coming Sunday, we're not just going to hear those powerful words of the Beatitudes, of the unlikely people that God announces a blessing on, but also we're going to hear this beautiful picture, this scene from the last book in the Bible, from Revelation, that sort of is one of those moments that feels like a musical, where people break out into song, and in this gathering there's people from every language and nation and tribe and culture, and there they are gathered together. You have to imagine they're all looking around going, how do we all end up here together, right? How do we end up in a club together? And part of the beauty of what it is to be the saints of God is to recognize we all don't fit this cookie cutter mold of being exactly the same, but that what it looks like to be the beloved and blessed of God takes 1,000 different forms and looks like 1,000 different stories too. We find our place in the midst of that in the total diversity of different ways of living out our faith. here in my office, I put up these pictures, icons and pictures of different faces throughout the story of Christianity. Some of them are anonymous, unknown faces. Some of them are well-known ones like Mr. Rogers or Dr. King. Some of them require a little bit of imagination about what St. Stephen or Mary, the mother of our Lord, might have looked like. And I put them here as a reminder to me every day, every Sunday, that we belong to this wider, strange, and beautiful, peculiar community of people from everywhere and every time and every language who might be surprised to be in the room with each other, but all beloved of God. But this coming Sunday, too, part of our tradition is to remember those from our congregation who have died in the last year, who've joined that great cloud of witnesses, who are part of that vast community of people from everywhere in every language, and to remember those names of people who were important to us, to remember that we still remain connected to them. Even if we aren't all in the same room now, we remain connected, and that we are promised at the last of being gathered together with God's people from every time and every place. We hold on to that resurrection hope while we also look around and say, we're called to some strange and wonderful, surprising work as the blessed people of God. We're called to be people who work for justice, who make peace. We're called to be people who announce God's blessing on the poor and the overlooked, to comfort those who are brokenhearted. That's our calling as the blessed people of God. It's a strange calling in a world that seems always, always bent on how do I impress people, climb up the ladder, get more status, dominate more people. And here we are, this surprising kind of community of anybody's and everybody's just seeking to live out justice and peace and love. That's our calling. And as we're reminded of that calling and of the people we do that alongside in the present moment and those who have gone before us, we find ourselves recentered, and maybe it feels like we're adding our voice into that great song, the great musical number from the book of Revelation. So to get a glimpse of all that, join us this Sunday as we celebrate the festival of All Saints and remember all those who've gone before us and those among us now, and also as we find our place in that surprising and peculiar and wonderfully rich and diverse community called the people of God. That's a celebration worth being a part of. See you Sunday.